I'm Haley B. Miller, and this is Ohio Politics Explained, a podcast where you give us 15 minutes and we give you all the news you need to sound smart and impress your friends. Welcome back to Ohio Politics Explained. What a year this month has been. Today, we'll discuss how Ohio is navigating Trump's immigration crackdown, proposed changes to the recreational marijuana law, the latest and the never-ending death penalty debate, and why parents want to see the state do more on childcare. Joining me today is Anthony Shoemaker.
Hey, Haley. How's it going?
We're surviving.
It's been a busy week.
Before we start my semi-regular plug, if you like what you hear on Oath, please consider leaving us a review or rating on Apple Podcasts. Okay, on to immigration. President Donald Trump is making good on his campaign promise to target immigrants who entered the U.S. illegally. He sent troops to the southern border and ramped up detainments by ICE officers. Trump also wants to set up a detention facility at Guantanamo Bay. In Ohio, school districts are trying to figure out what all of this means for them. And some big city mayors are refusing to enforce federal immigration law. What else are you hearing?
Well, Dave Yost, the Attorney General, is talking about, wanting to ban sanctuary cities. And he's also talking about, saying cities don't have the power to interfere with these ICE raids and roundups. We saw Monday, was it up near Cleveland? There were like 50 people that were taken into custody at a restaurant up there. And, lawmakers here in Ohio are looking to punish cities for not going along with what the feds are doing, like if they try to stand up to these immigration raids.
Yeah, there's a new bill that was introduced this week that would require law enforcement to comply with these federal immigration orders from ICE and things like that. And like you said, cities would have to comply. And if they don't, some of their funding would be taken away through the local government fund that the state provides. So really just emphasizing that Republicans see this as a priority. And, while versions of this legislation have come up in the past, it's very relevant now because of what the Trump administration is doing.
Yeah, and I know like up in Cleveland, Mayor Bibb was pretty forceful, coming out in support of the city's immigrant population. This is another kind of a fight between state lawmakers and cities, which we've seen over and over again.
Yeah, and I mentioned the schools. If I recall correctly, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong, one of the policies that Trump implemented removed schools as safe spaces essentially for these ICE raids. And so Columbus City Schools, Cincinnati School District, they've been trying to figure out how this is going to apply to them. I know Columbus school officials sent out a letter to the district community basically saying that, they still want schools to be a safe place for all students. And so I think there's just a lot of unknowns right now.
Yeah, and you have to think that in cities where you have large immigrant populations, like in Columbus, that's going to impact attendance. Parents are going to be reluctant to send their kids to school if they don't feel like it's a safe space. And, a lot of these raids are also happening around the country at workplaces and warehouses. So it'll be interesting to see if businesses are seeing an impact on attendance.
Right. And, of course, in Ohio, Springfield has gotten a lot of attention within the immigration debate because of the Haitian population there and the false claims that Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance made about Haitians in Springfield eating people's pets. Governor DeWine has emphasized that he believes the Trump administration is just going after people who have committed crimes and are not in the country illegally and, still supports the Springfield Haitian community and says he sees a place for them in Ohio. But I think there's a lot of uncertainty and fear among, people who live in Springfield, the Haitians in Springfield, about what could come next for things like temporary protective status.
Yeah. And, even though the Haitians in Springfield are here legally, we've heard reports, from them just, suffering some intimidation in the city. People driving by and telling them to pack their bags, Trump's in office now, get ready to go home. So that's going to keep people inside. Our colleague Aaron Glenn was writing about how some of the people in the Haitian community say they're afraid to go outside now, and worried about these roundups.
Yeah, I think this is going to be something that's going to continue to have an effect on Ohio and around the country for a while now. Our next topic today is marijuana. Republican lawmakers want to make major changes to the recreational marijuana law, which voters approved in 2023. The bill would increase the tax rate to 15%, eliminate the social equity program, and direct revenue to the state's general fund instead of municipalities or addiction services like it does right now. The bill introduced this week wasn't a big surprise, really, but it's a huge departure from what voters said they wanted.
Yeah, and, voters passed the marijuana law pretty overwhelmingly. And also, it didn't just pass in urban communities. It passed in rural Republican areas as well. And home grow is a big part of that, I think. And we're also hearing so many complaints about the cost already. It's raising the taxes even higher, you would think, is going to have an impact on sales.
Yeah, this bill would also reduce the maximum number of plants that you can grow at home from 12 to 6. And, if you're driving around with marijuana or marijuana paraphernalia, you have to put it in your trunk. And, the state would no longer be required to allow for delivery and online ordering. So a lot of things that I think consumers want, they could potentially not be getting anymore. And, to your point, I think a lot of people are still going to Michigan because of the cost. And if the tax rate is higher than it is in Michigan, which it would be if they hiked it to 15, then I think the incentive to purchase products in Ohio will diminish.
Yeah, I mean, in your story on it this week, you talked about total sales are nearing 300 million in Ohio as of Saturday. Ohio is, the program is growing, but, if the taxes continue to go up, at some point it's going to have the opposite effect, you would think. And people are going to be like, it's just too expensive here.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what happens with this bill. As far as I can tell, Senate Republicans want to prioritize this, want to pass this as soon as possible. There's been a lot of talk about changes to the marijuana program since the statute passed in 2023, but the House and Senate didn't really get along last session, couldn't really get it together and agree on changes. I think they're a lot more unified right now on a lot of different things, and that includes marijuana policy. So we, could see some pretty big restrictions coming down the pipe.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues when the voters vote on one of these initiated statutes. It's not a constitutional amendment, so the lawmakers can make changes despite what the public voted on.
Let's move on to the death penalty. Every legislative session, a group of Republicans and Democrats tries to end the death penalty in Ohio. It never goes anywhere. But lawmakers are testing out a new tactic this time. A bill that would end capital punishment and also ban state-funded abortion and assisted suicide. What do you make of this?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I've never heard of tying those things together. State Rep Gene Schmidt from down in the Cincinnati area is kind of talking about this as like an overwhelming pro-life bill. So it's like pro-life, not just for abortion, but pro-life also when it comes to the death penalty and assisted suicide. Abortion rights activists are kind of fighting this. Some of them are saying that, this needs to be separate. If you want to outlaw the death penalty, just do it and don't tie it to abortion. It'll be interesting to see where this is going to go. Yeah,
this bill quickly made a lot of people mad. You mentioned the abortion advocates. They believe that a ban on state-funded abortion, which is already in statute, they believe that that is illegal, unconstitutional under the new Abortion Rights Amendment. And on the other side of things, Republicans who support the death penalty just don't really see the point to this. I talked to State Rep Brian Stewart, and he said, Republicans have opposed state-funded abortions for a long time, and we have that in the book, so we're not going to toss aside another policy priority, essentially. And he has a bill that would allow the state to use nitrogen gas for executions, which would give the state the ability to restart them because they've been on hold in large part due to access or lack thereof to lethal injection drugs.
Yeah, I mean, Governor DeWine has not had, there hasn't been an execution in Ohio since Governor DeWine became governor back in 2019, but, even during the Kasich administration, they had to stop because of access to the drugs. And with Governor DeWine, kind of the race to replace him has already started. And, the next governor of the state is likely to be very supportive of the death penalty. So it's hard to see that it just going away.
Our final topic for today is childcare, a perennial problem for families in Ohio. In a new poll from Groundwork Ohio, 2/3 of families said they had problems accessing affordable childcare. 60% of Ohio mothers would return to work full-time if they could find reliable childcare that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Researchers have found childcare costs anywhere from $8 to $11,000, depending on the age of the kid. That's just wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a college tuition, and the poll that came out shows, Democrats and Republicans agreeing that, childcare is too high and it is playing a major impact on the workforce.
It's one of those issues that I feel like we hear lawmakers talking about all the time, and we haven't really seen any progress. Governor Mike DeWine proposed a $2,500 annual tax deduction for people with kids, but that got scrapped from the budget. Lawmakers also considered an income tax credit for some childcare expenses, but that didn't pass. And, there are also a lot of problems on the workforce side of things. It's childcare does not pay the best, and therefore agencies experience a lot of turnover, and we haven't really seen any efforts to try to fix that piece of the puzzle. So we'll see. I mean, DeWine's budget's coming out soon. I would be surprised if childcare isn't addressed somehow, but...
Yeah, well, and it's also just kind of a domino effect. I mean, when you think about the people who are in the age range where, you're having children and having to pay for childcare, you're also dealing with higher costs of housing. You're still paying off student loans. So, there's only so much money that young families have to spend on childcare.
And at the same time that this childcare crisis has been going on, we've seen the Republican Party increasingly say that they want to support families, support people with children, because, they don't want people getting abortions, but they've realized a hardline anti-abortion message is not working for them at the ballot box. So again, you would think that there would be more movement on this issue in Ohio than we've seen at this point.
Yeah, it's playing a major role in hiring. And the poll also showed that almost 90% of parents said they've missed work because of childcare issues. So this has been a big issue for the Chamber of Commerce, saying that Ohio has to deal with this problem.
And one more thing before you go. Jane Temkin got a Senate seat after all. The former Ohio Republican Party chair was rumored as a possible replacement for Vance in the U.S. Senate, but that job went to John Husted. Instead, Temkin was sworn into the state Senate this week to replace the late Kirk Schuring in a Canton area district.